האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We're in the Zera Shimshon on the Haggadah. We're going to take a look at Drush Vav, section number 6 in the Zera Shimshon's commentary on the Haggadah. Before we do that, we're going to take a look at a pasuk that's going to sound very familiar. It is a well-known pasuk both from the Torah and from the Haggadah, and it comes from Pashas Kisavo. This is Sefer Devarim, Parak Chav Vav, pasuk Hey. The pasuk comes from the special declaration that was made when a person brought the bikurim, the first fruits, and here comes the pasuk: Ve'anisa ve'amarta, and you should call out and you should say, Lifnei Hashem Elokecha, before Hashem your God, Arami Oved Avi, an Aramean tried to destroy my father. Vayered Mitzrayma, and he went down to Egypt. Vayogar Sham, and he dwelled there. B'misei me'ot, few in number. Vayehi Sham legoy gadol atzum varav, and he became there a great nation, mighty and numerous. So the Zera Shimshon is going to discuss that pasuk and what the Haggadah says about that pasuk. Let's go right into the words of the Zera Shimshon. Vayered Mitzrayma, on the first two words of the pasuk that Yaakov Avinu went down to Mitzrayim, the Haggadah puts in the words Anus al pi hadibor, that Yaakov Avinu was compelled to go down to Mitzrayim through the word of Hashem, or through the order, the command of Hashem. Yaakov Avinu had to go down to Mitzrayim against his will. Vayogar Sham, and he dwelled there. Melamed shelo yorad Yaakov Avinu lehishtakeya b'Mitzrayim. This expression of Vayogar Sham, that he dwelled there or that he sojourned there, teaches us that Yaakov Avinu did not go down to Mitzrayim with the intention of settling there, Elo lagor Sham, but rather to only temporarily dwell there. Shenemar, as another pasuk says, and this pasuk takes us all the way back to Bereshis, and it's talking about when Yosef presented some of his brothers to Paro. We're going to hear what they said. So Shenemar, as the pasuk says, quoting the brothers of Yosef, Vayomru el Paro, and they said to Paro, Logor ba'aretz banu, to sojourn in the land we have come. Ki ein mireh latzon, because there is no place for our flocks to harvest, v'chule, etc., meaning back in Eretz Canaan, the famine had made things so bad that the brothers were explaining to Paro that they did not come to Mitzrayim to live there or to settle there permanently at all. Rather, they came with the intention of staying there until the famine in the land of Canaan ended. And so the assumption is that if that's what Yosef's brothers said, if that's what the sons of Yaakov Avinu said, then that must have also been Yaakov Avinu's intention. And so he only came down to Mitzrayim, according to this reading in the Haggadah. He only came down because he was forced to, and he did not come down to settle permanently, but only to sojourn and be in the land of Mitzrayim temporarily. Makshim, the Zera Shimshon now points out or continues, Makshim, the commentators ask, Lama lohevi ra'oya mehakosuv, why didn't the Haggadah bring a proof from another pasuk, al piska vayered Mitzrayma, on the statement that it just made above, that Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim, anus al pi hadibor, and he was compelled, he was forced to do so through the word of Hashem, or through the will of Hashem. Why doesn't it bring a pasuk to support that? Kimosha asa, as the Haggadah did, bishar chalukos, as it did with the other little snippets or sections of psukim that it brought, uvishar hatevo shel hapasuk, and in fact, as it did on the other words of this self-same pasuk, right? So the Zera Shimshon is bringing a strong question, which is, usually it's the derech of the Haggadah, it's the way of the Haggadah, when it quotes a pasuk and then it makes a comment on the pasuk, an interpretive comment, the Haggadah then brings Shenemar, it brings another pasuk to prove the interpretive comment that was made. But here it didn't do that. It stated Vayered Mitzrayim, that Yaakov Avinu went down to Mitzrayim and he was compelled by Hashem to do so, but it doesn't bring a pasuk to support that idea. V'im Tomar, and if you say Shelo Yeshra Oyamea pasuk, if you say, well, the reason it didn't bring a pasuk is because it didn't have a pasuk. There is no pasuk. Perhaps you'll suggest there is no pasuk that teaches us that Yaakov Avinu was forced and compelled by Hashem's decree to go down to Mitzrayim. And that's why the Haggadah didn't quote such a pasuk, because it doesn't exist. Im kain, if so, minayan lo. If that's the case, then where did the Baal HaHaggadah, where did the author of the Haggadah come up with this idea to say that Yaakov Avinu was compelled to go down to Mitzrayim if that is not stated in any pasuk? What is the source for that idea? Zera Shimshon is going to develop an answer to that question in the coming paragraphs. Next paragraph. V'nir elisaret, and it seems that we can answer. Dilo itzterich pasuk ura'oya al zeh. We don't need a separate pasuk to prove this and a special proof for this. Techavonas hamagid, because the intention of the teller, meaning again the Baal HaHaggadah, the author of the Haggadah's intention is lomar, to say shevayered Mitzrayim onus al pi hadibor, this idea that Yaakov was compelled to go down to Mitzrayim by Hashem, nafgalon, we learn it out mivayogar sham, from the next words in the pasuk, that he sojourned in Mitzrayim. Melamed shelo yorad. This teaches us that he did not go down, v'chule, etc., meaning he did not go down to settle permanently in Mitzrayim, but he only came to sojourn. He only came to stay temporarily. Shenemar, as it says, vayomru el Paro, the brothers of Yosef said to Paro, about only coming to stay temporarily because of the famine back in Eretz Canaan. Mishum de Amrinan b'Medrash Rabbah, because we see that it is that we say, in the Medrash Rabbah, al pasuk v'Yosef hurad Mitzrayim, on the pasuk that Yosef was brought down to Mitzrayim. So the Medrash Rabbah states on that pasuk, Moshel lefora, there is an analogy here to a cow. Shemoshchen osa limukolin, they are pulling it to the slaughterhouse. V'lo hayasa nimsheches, and it would not allow itself to be pulled. People were trying to, the owner of a cow was trying to bring it to the slaughterhouse, and other people were trying to help him, but it was a big, strong, heavy cow, and it wouldn't allow itself to be pulled to the slaughterhouse. Me'asu, what did they do? Holichu b'na lefoneha. They brought the child of the cow, the calf, in front of it, and they led the calf in front of this cow. V'hi ha'yisa holeches acharav, and now the cow went and walked after its calf. Bal korcha, against its will, shelo b'tovasa, and not for its own good. The cow that's following the calf had some intuition as to what was in store for it and didn't want to proceed to the slaughterhouse, but it felt compelled to follow after its calf, and it did so. And of course, that did not turn out to be for the good of the cow. Koch Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Medrash says this is exactly what Hashem said, or what Hashem planned. Hareini Moshech bino lefonav. I'm going to bring the son of Yaakov Avinu, namely Yosef, in front of him down to Mitzrayim. The Aviv Yaakov, and Yosef's father Yaakov, Yelech Acharov, will go after him, meaning will come down to Mitzrayim because Yosef is there. Be'al korcho, against his will, shelo b'tovoso, and not for his own benefit. Yaakov Avinu had no intention whatsoever of leaving Eretz Yisrael. In other words, he was not at all considering or planning himself to go down to Mitzrayim. As we know from the story in Chumash, of course, Yaakov Avinu, when his family was getting low on food supplies, he sent his sons to go down. And when that situation, then they came back. And when that situation repeated itself, he sent his sons to go down again. But he had no intention of going down to Mitzrayim himself until the sons came back. His sons came back and told him that Yosef was there. And ultimately, that's what prompted Yaakov Avinu to come down to Mitzrayim. Vehiksha HaYefei Toar, and the commentary of the Yefei Toar asks on this statement in the Medrash Rabbah, V'dilma Maseh Shehoya Koch Hoya. Perhaps what happened is exactly what happened, meaning the fact that Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim. How do we know that that was compelled by Hashem and part of some special plan on the part of Hashem? Maybe it just is turned out to be a kind of incidental or chance occurrence, meaning maybe it was derech hateva. Maybe it was a natural course of events that Yaakov realized that there wasn't enough food in Eretz Canaan, and there was plenty of food in Eretz Mitzrayim. And so he decided, without any special compulsion on Hashem's part, he decided to go down and bring the family to Mitzrayim so that they would have plenty of food to eat. That's the question of the Yefei Toar, which of course mirrors the original question of the Zera Shimshon. How did the Baal Haggadah know that that onus al pi hadibor, that Yaakov was compelled by Hashem to go down to Mitzrayim? That's this question again. Shebishvil she'echav mochru leYosef bechet ve'avon, since Yosef's brothers had sold him through a sin and through a transgression, shelo midas uritzon hakodesh baruch hu, that was not with the intention and will of Hashem. So Yosef's brothers did something that was considered a sinful act. And therefore, we can say, by definition, if it was a sinful act, then that it went against the will of Hashem. It was a transgression, a chet and an avon, as the Zera Shimshon says. And therefore, we shouldn't refer to it as the will of Hashem, perhaps. Hashem's will was that they not commit this terrible act, this sin of mechiras Yosef. Shalomi dasu ritzon hakodesh baruch hu. It was not the intention of will of Hashem. Umishum hachi, and because of this, because the brothers did this, nolad derech mikra, we might think that it developed in a incidental or chance way. Sheyelech Yaakov leMitzrayim, that Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim. Ad kan lashono, until here is a quote from the Yefei Toar. So the Yefei Toar not only asks the question of how it was known or why it was thought by the Medrash, the same idea that we see in the Haggadah, that it was Hashem's plan to compel Yaakov to come down to Mitzrayim. He not only asks the question, how do we know that that's what was going on, but he provides a rationale to the question. And he says, perhaps it was all derech hateva, perhaps it was all in the natural order, and wasn't part of Hashem's plan, with the proof, so to speak, being that the Yosef's brothers did an avera when they did mechiras Yosef, when they sold Yosef. So therefore, it wasn't a part of Hashem's plan, apparently. And if it wasn't part of Hashem's plan, then why did Yaakov go down? Everything developed naturally in that way. As we said before, there wasn't enough food, and the brothers came back and said, Yosef is in charge of the food in Mitzrayim, and he can take care of us all for as long as we need to be there, until the famine ends in Eretz Canaan and we can go back home. And so Yaakov agreed and he came down. Why is that not a possible explanation? The Yefei Toar asks, again, reflecting the original question of the Zera Shimshon. Next paragraph. V'lachein Omar Hamagid. And therefore the Baal Haggadah says, Vayered Mitzrayma, Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim. Onus al pi hadibor, he was compelled by the word of Hashem. Ve'im tomar, and if you ask, hakol hayaderech mikra, all of this was the natural order. Uminayin lanu shehoya onus al pi hadibor, and from where do we know that it wasn't the natural order, but it was a special arrangement made by Hashem to compel Yaakov Avinu to go to Mitzrayim as part of Hashem's plan? How do we know that? Lochein semich le, therefore the Torah put next to the words, it juxtaposed next to the words of Yaakov going down, it put down Vayogar Sham. And he sojourned there. He came to dwell there temporarily. Melamid shelo yorad Yaakov Avinu lishtakea, which, as the Haggadah continues, it teaches us that Yaakov did not go down originally with the intention to settle in Mitzrayim permanently, v'chule, etc. V'im hakol hayaderech mikra, and if everything was as we are suggesting, or as the question is kind of presenting to us, if it's true, this idea that it was all the natural order and a kind of chance occurrence, hayolo lachazor, then Yaakov Avinu would have gone back and returned to Eretz Canaan. V'loma nishtakei sham. Why did he end up settling and staying permanently in Mitzrayim? So the idea of that Hashem compelled Yaakov to come down comes to us right from the next words in the pasuk about Yaakov Avinu's intention being only to come temporarily to Mitzrayim and not to settle there. And we are supposed to realize, wait a minute, he did end up settling there, and the family stayed there even after the famine in Eretz Canaan ended. And why did they do that? So the Zera Shimshon continues. V'loma nishtakei sham. Why did he in fact remain and settle in Mitzrayim? Elavadai. But definitely we see shahakol hoya merton hakodesh baruch hu. Everything from the beginning was through the will of Hashem sheyovo leMitzrayim b'derech zo, that Yosef should come down and descend to Mitzrayim in this manner. Did the Isa b'medrash parashas Vayeshev, as we see reflected in another medrash. This one is on Parshas Vayeshev. And here the Medrash starts off with a quote from Psukim, and it's important that we realize that there's a major typographical error here, which I'm going to show you right now. The pasuk is quoted as saying, L'chu chazu mif'alos Elokim. Go and see the wonders of Hashem. However, in the actual sefer Tehillim, the second word is not chazu, it's the word uri'u, which also means to see. But the pasuk doesn't actually say l'chu chazu, it says l'chu uri'u. So that's something you need to change in your Zera Shimshons if you have a copy of the Zera Shimshon sefer, or in the sheet if you print it out. L'chu uri'u mif'alos Elokim. Go and see the wonders of Hashem v'chule. And then there are a few more words in the pasuk. And then the pasuk continues, hafach yom layabosha. Hashem changed and turned the sea into dry land. And so the Medrash sees from that pasuk that one of the wondrous acts of Hashem that he planned out from beforehand was to ultimately turn the Yam Suf, to open up a path and to turn the water into dry land so Bnei Yisrael could go through. And then the Medrash continues, Lama vayisna'u oso. Why did the brothers have a hatred for Yosef all the way back in the beginning of the story before Yosef came down to Mitzrayim, which of course led the way of bringing down all of the family and ultimately all of the Jewish people to being in Mitzrayim? Why did that start? What was the germination of the hatred that the brothers felt for Yosef? Kedei sheyikara hayom lifneihem, in order that all of the things should happen and that they would ultimately culminate in Bnei Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim, being brought out from Mitzrayim, the Yetzias Mitzrayim, under Moshe's leadership, under the miracles performed by Hashem, and the Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea in front of them. Ad kan Lashono, until here's a quote from the Medrash. So the Zera Shimshon brings this Medrash because it clearly states this idea that he has developed for us, that it was Hashem's plan all along to have everything develop the way that it did, starting with the hatred of the brothers for Yosef. That was a necessary element in the story, so that they would sell Yosef. So Yosef would come down to Mitzrayim. So Yosef would become the leader in Mitzrayim, and ultimately Yaakov and his family would move down and come to Mitzrayim. All of that was the original part of Hashem's plan, and that's what the Haggadah means when it says Onus al pi hadibor. Yaakov Avinu was compelled. It was part of Hashem's plan, and he had to follow ultimately the different steps to ensure that Hashem's plan of bringing Bnei Yisrael down to Mitzrayim took place. Umikan muchach, and from here it proves shesinas echov liYosef, that the hatred of the brothers for Yosef hayusa biritzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was with the will of Hashem, not as we said previously, as we suggested previously in the Yefei Toar commentary that the Zera Shimshon brought, that because it was a sin and a sinful thing to do, that must by definition mean it went against and violated the Ratzon of Hashem. It was in fact the Ratzon of Hashem for the enmity to develop and for Yosef to be sold and to end up in Mitzrayim. Ubishvil zeh yorad Yaakov leMitzrayim, and because of that, Yaakov ended up himself going down to Mitzrayim. V'lo haya b'derech mikra, and it wasn't something incidental or by chance or just a natural order. Ela hakol haya min HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but everything that happened from the beginning of the story of Yosef and his brothers down to Yaakov Avinu and the whole family coming down to Mitzrayim, all of that was Hashem's plan to bring Bnei Yisrael down to Mitzrayim, for them to be enslaved there, and for ultimately for them to be redeemed and rescued by Hashem, which we will talk about in detail and celebrate in a couple days when we get together with our families for Chag HaPesach. Yasher Koach to joining in the learning tonight, and we look forward to learning in the Zera Shimshon again together, God willing, next week.